So hi everybody, Jan Guarino and Fearless Watercolors, and today we're going back to Italy, and we're going to be doing this beautiful typical Tuscan side of the landscape scene with the cypress trees and this beautiful rock building around it, and the flowers and the rows of whatever they are, grapes or olives, who knows what they're growing, but they grow it along the Tuscan landscape in these rows, which are so distinctive, and these rolling hills and these beautiful homes and villas kind of tucked into the landscape. So this was from a trip a number of 2 years ago now, and I just thought it was so beautiful. So I want to just pretend that we're sitting there and I'm sort of talking you through what to look for. And we've narrowed down this broad, wide scene in front of us to this sweet spot. And that's what I'm looking at. So let's start our engines and let's switch cameras here. And here we are. This is the scene, and I just love it. I think it was just such a beautiful area that we were in. And the idea here is that to really start and think about these bigger washes, and then either we'll see how many details we add into it, and if not, we have to take it back to the villa and we have to finish it there, those details. But when you're doing plein air, I do recommend that you practice it. It's certainly a lovely thing to practice, but also that you wherever you are, outside, a park, a beach, a backyard, your own place, just try to do a little bit of plein air and find what I call the sweet spots that really speak to you. Don't look to take it all in. You just have to narrow it down and keep it on the tighter side, and don't try to be overly ambitious, which I felt that this was a good start. So it's a beautiful sunny day, as you could see. I'm going to take my number 10. This is a simple number 10 synthetic brush that I get in all of the gallery museum shops. I just love them so, and I love, there's just something great about the shape and whatnot. It doesn't say it's a number 10, but what I love is that I have a collection of them here's from the Morgan Library and Museum, and here's from the Met, and I've gotten them in just about every place that I go that has a museum. I check out the shop, and I like painting with them, but I also love collecting them. So that's kind of fun. And there's a beautiful point on them too. So, I'm working a quarter sheet here. I'm sorry, eighth sheet, a little bit smaller, only because I'm looking to take in some big washes and not worry about that big sheet of paper. And what I'm going to do first is I'm going to take a cobalt blue or cerulean blue. Here's my palette. I'll just show you right here. There it is right there. I got my blues going into my violets, into my pinks, oranges, yellows, and greens. So I'm just going to go to a cobalt, and I'm going to just start with a nice, if you don't have cobalt, or if you prefer cerulean, or use both, because the sky is not the same wherever you look, right? Now, what I'm not going to have you do is I'm not going to have you worry about these. Let me go a little closer for you. I'm not going to worry about these, the cypress trees that there. Go right through them. Go right through them. And remember, this is going to sound funny. I'm going right through those trees, right through them, because I know that I will not get mud if I add yellow or green to them, because blue is in green, right? It's one of the colors that makes up green. And so, you don't have to worry about that ever, so I don't want it looking carved out. And so I just want to have that beautiful wash right on there. And so I'm just deepening it a little bit. And again, I pretty much stopped at the roof. Okay, that's where I stopped my blue. And I like the idea of maybe charging it up with a little bit more color. And I got my paper tilted. Now remember, you are outside and things are going to dry very, very fast. So you have to think of working fast, because it's going to happen whether you like it or not. I'm just telling you like it is. So a little bit of cobalt and a little bit of cerulean. And again, those two colors are just, right next to each other on the color wheel. And the area of green that is in that background, I'm not worried about that because you can take this and feather this right on down. And this way, there's a very, very nice soft edge, how your blue kind of comes down into that horizontal, that kind of diagonal horizontal line where the color changes, and that's where the landscape changes, and it's on an angle, and that's where they're growing, who knows, olives, grapes. I don't know what this particular vineyard was growing. Now, again, keeping in mind that this is all going to dry pretty fast. That's where I'm at so far, right? It's going to dry fast, but it's for my benefit. And I'm going to tell you why. I want the background to go soft. And so if it goes soft, that's going to be a good starting place. So whether you take a green, if you want to take your undersea green, that's a great green to use. And what I'm going to do is one of the a rigger. I love using the rigger because it gets me away from doing too much detail, like close up like this, and I'm further back on my brush, and that helps me. This is all very wet right now, okay? And if I start adding some green, it's going to go very soft. It's going very soft, which is exactly what I'm looking for. I just want that nice, soft depth of field focus, everything just going way soft and not getting into the details of that horizon line. Now, just by nature of it being green and these, vertical cypress trees sort of heading up into against the sky is going to tell you that they're trees. And so, again, I'm looking for some idea of depth of field here. And the idea is that things further away can be out of focus. And this is a nice little trick to sort of utilize when you're doing plein air. And, or, just think about it with any kind of scene that you're doing. To add this initially is a really nice way to simplify a scene and yet tell the story, right? So you can use, if you don't have the undersea, you could use a little bit of yellow if you'd like. And the yellow and the blue will also intermix and make it look a little on the green side. Or you could add a little bit of yellow to the green, and you could see it's just going super, super soft. And whether or not I sort of have a little bit of, got a little messy in my sky. So this is, again, still wet. It probably wouldn't be if I were, outside, but I just changed that because a couple of drops got in there of green. So I just went in and added a little bit more blue. And that's where I'm sort of starting, is right there. And again, make sure you follow where your edges sort of go hard and soft. So right now, my only hard edge is really kind of just tooling out around the villa, the house that's just on that landscape there. And I'm using a little bit of Quin Gold just to have that golden color a little bit on the landscape, right? So it's really, really soft. And I'm going to just kind of edge it right here, not a straight edge going all the way across, but where that other lighter color is sort of there. And just, again, and you know what, we're sort of have the benefit of our homes probably being a little bit warmer because it's warm outside. So, my guess is that everybody's sort of has a little bit warmer situation. And at any point, as things are drying, you can go back in and just charge it up with another cypress tree. You can see how I just dropped that in. A nice, quick little vertical mark. what you want to be careful of, and I will warn you about it, because even if you see it here in the scenery or in the photograph, is you don't want these to be same size, same width, same height, same distance. We tend to want to form a pattern, and we want to make it kind of uniform somehow. And we all do it. I do it. So you have to just be a little bit more cognizant of the fact that that is something you do not want to have in your painting, and you could disrupt it at any time. So even if you see these, you know, they sort of line these up like evenly, you don't want to do that. You want to make it look far more interesting than that. And I'm just charging up behind of that area a little bit. And I'm going to imagine that the sun, well, I don't have to imagine. I could see the sun is coming from this side because the shadow of the vineyards here, those rows, is on the right side. So your sun is coming from this side here. So to have a little patch of yellow there is actually not a bad thought, right? You could think about that. And I'm just going through and just adding a little bit more color, less water, and just getting a little bit more definition. It does not have to be, you know, perfect. It shouldn't be equal. It shouldn't be, you know, because all these different marks will help you to, you know, define that there's a shift, there's a change, there's something going on that is happening in your landscape. And so now I don't know if any of you have the Holbein leaf green. If you don't worry, we could use yellow, but there's a really nice shift in color that comes right here, and you could achieve it by just using your blue and your yellow if you don't have the Holbein leaf green. It's a beautiful green. I'll show it to you. If you don't have it, I like it. It's a really fun green, but it's a yellowy green. And so, of course, you could achieve that just by adding a little bit more yellow into your green. And there is this little shift that's going on as the landscape is sort of being hit with the sun on that left side. And all of this here, I'm just going to bring these down a little bit and just start. Now, of course, this is going green. This is that large, you know, flower planter there. Well, you know, guess what? You don't have to tool around that at all. You can go right through that and not even worry about it because it's going to be darker. So this is where I will say to you, don't save your darks. Don't worry about your darks. Don't save your darks. Don't do anything except paint them. You want to paint them, right? You want to paint your darks, and because you're going to make them darker. So this here, right here, you could just bring that color right into that area of that planter. I just brought that whole thing in right there. And, you know, think about saving some, you know, little highlights of whites or something like that. That's always a nice thing to do, is just where the sun just hits an area so strong. And you could also bring a little bit of blue into some of these because, of course, the blue and the yellow, they will make a very nice green also. And so that's how I always know I'm not going to get mud, is because if I'm using colors that are sitting next to each other on the color wheel, you will not get mud. And I always like to explain that to watercolor students. And of course, that whole concept of that you guys, you know by now my MO with that. If I want to get mud, I'm going to allow for it to be, you know, I'm going to use complementary colors, which we will be doing in a moment. So let me back out and I'll just show you, I'm sort of building some of these ideas of these rows and rows of these beautiful, whatever they are, whatever they're growing. And you notice that here, I want to point something out to you guys. Here, it's a little straighter. And as you move away, they go more on an angle. Now I put that in my contour drawing, but that's going to be very important because that's going to determine your that's part of the landscape. That's part of how you're getting your perspective. It's a little bit of perspective in there. Okay. Just dropping a little bit more of that Holbein leaf green in there. Just love that color. It's such a great light spring green color. Using my rigger. And if you don't have the Quin Gold, use your lemon yellow. That's a great color. Or your Indian yellow. I have all of them. When I travel, though, I travel with a much smaller palette. I don't really go crazy with it too much. And here I'm just feathering this down along this side because I just don't want to get a hard edge. I want to build that a little bit more. Okay. All of this, we're going to build and change the colors and shift all of that. And I sort of gave you these rows of the shadows a little bit. So while this is wet, or at least damp, it may be nice to just drop a little bit darker green in. Time your painting, time it, and test it and see if it's a good time to do this. Everybody's just going to dry a little bit differently. So you just want to, and look how quickly we are getting those beautiful Tuscan rows of their fields. And I love the softness. Guess what? We could always go back and add more detail. Of course, I'm really looking forward to doing the detail that's in the rock wall that's right there. That's really so beautiful. And those things will be more in focus, more detailed, and a greater amount of information there. So, and you'll notice here it is. This is straighter and this is on an angle. So make sure that as you come around, as you move this way, it's a little straighter. And I'm going to stop there, I think, and let you guys sort of catch up a little bit, and we'll go ahead and do a little bit more. So let's just move forward. So certainly none of this is done, okay? But what I want to do is just go in and give a little bit of that warm glow to our building. And so if our sun is coming this way, what I'm going to do is put the one side, I got a little bit of green here, I'm going to put one side in more of a, like a warmer tone. So I'm thinking maybe a little dragon's blood on that side. And then I'm going to put more of a violet on the other side because that will help me with the shadow. So initially, I'm just adding a little bit of dragon's blood into this. I'm melting it down into the landscape a little bit just so I don't have a hard edge, and go right through the other side. And so when I say don't save your darks, this is what I mean. Just don't save that dark at all. Just go right through it and just get a little color right in there right now. And what we'll do is we will certainly build the more of that color to go into the rest of the landscape, because we don't want it to be just in one spot. That's what we don't want. But certainly we have plenty of opportunities in our flowers here and on the wall, certainly to start building that kind of color into our painting. So I just want to test something out with you guys. I just want to show you the idea of going back in, and you don't have to do this now, but I wanted to get it recorded that, see, later on we can add more of this sort of deeper, darker contrast and detail to a painting. but having that initial wash just sort of lets you get the strong parts down. So certainly that's something that you could do. And maybe you don't want to do it everywhere. Maybe you just want to do it in a couple of spots. And, you know, this is more towards the center of the painting, right? And, you know, that whole idea that, you know, keep the visual where you want it to be. And just because the photo shows the detail on both sides does not mean you have to paint it that way. That's certainly your own ability to discern what it is you want to paint. And so you could have this go like a little bit more abstract on either side and a little deeper, richer, darker where the villa is right in that, you know, to further the attention that you want to put towards it. So I just wanted to show that to you, that I don't consider that background completed, but it might be something that I do later on because I know that those are all trees and shrubs and things like that. So just thinking a little bit of knowing where we have to go with this. And as this is drying, what I want to do is just grab a little bit of violet and just start dropping this in to tone that side down a little bit so that it is building that nice shadow side. Let me go a little closer for you. So I'm just, it's not dry. I'm just sort of letting the paint sort of mix a little bit and just giving it a little bit of an opportunity to mingle, and we'll go back in and do a little bit more on that. But now I just added two colors that is nowhere, they doesn't exist anywhere else. So I know, because I like to do this, I'm adding a little bit of violet into maybe the background trees. Not all of them, but maybe a few little shadowy areas, because we want to think about the idea of bridging the palette. So I'm going to leave this area alone right now, but I want you to think about that your shadows can be created with these alternative colors. And that's a really, really nice way to look at a painting and think about a painting and whatnot. That just because they're trees, well, we know they're trees and we know, you know, where they are and, you know, what kind of trees they are. And I think if you stopped right now, people would know exactly where you are because the uniqueness of the landscape, right? So just a little bit of dragon's blood and a little bit of violet, and I'm going to leave that alone. And I want to start building the rest of this a little bit more with you. Even to the point where you could take maybe a combination of a reddish violet, right? So you could take a little bit of dragon's blood and a little bit of violet, and you could even go into some of these areas here of these shadows that are on these fields. And you could really build those shadows a little bit more. And let me just back out and show you how that initial wash, while you may think, oh my goodness, it melted, it did this, it did that, it's so loose. This can support that kind of mark. And I just, again, wanted to show you where I'm going with this whole bridging the palette, the colors that I'm using, where I'm using them, how I'm using them. All of that is what I wanted to, you know, sort of achieve with this painting and with this image and this photograph in this spot. So, yeah. So I want to get a little bit more color. Let's go in. These are things, by the way, these rows here. And I definitely want to go back and do more of the villa, the house there, and a little bit more to the background. But for now, let's work on this lower right quadrant here and get a little bit of tone in there. And so this, again, is a great place to build some of the colors that we are going to be using in the rest of the painting. So there's a little bit of dragon's blood right there. I'm going to build all of that nice, beautiful area that's all tumbling down. And then I'm just going to go in and I'm just going to drop some beautiful colors into our stonework here. Going to keep that left side a little bit white. And then as I come around and towards us, I'm going to add a little bit more color. So I'm using my violet and I'm using my dragon's blood. And you know what? I mean, you could bridge the palette right here. Let me go a little closer for you. We can bridge the palette with all of our colors in this area. You don't have to say, oh, but those aren't the colors I saw and whatever. Guess what? This is a great place to add some blues. Carry the blue down. We're going to be doing that in that area there with the I'm sorry, the plants that are in the the planters, right? We're going to be going in and definitely adding some blues. But this is a way, and this is what I find so many people sort of, as soon as you work on your own, you sort of forget some of these main points of bridging the palette and putting color in areas that you might not see it, and adding contrast, and all of those things tend to be what I see when students send me their painting and they want a bit of a critique. This is where they are tightening up, and so these are sort of skill sets that I would love to see you guys think about when you're doing paintings on your own. So here I'm sort of bridging the palette with this blue and the violet and the dragon's blood. And even if you dropped a little bit of yellow into it, just let the colors mix in, and you'll find that they start intermingling themselves and creating their own color. So think about it this way, okay? We're talking about complementary colors and analogous colors. So by adding a little bit of yellow in here with the violet, right, then that sort of tones the violet down a little bit. And what a great place to have all the colors sort of come together. You wouldn't think of it, but these are the things I think about whenever I'm working on a painting. And these are the things that I want you to think about, when you're doing your own paintings. No matter what your style, no matter even more of the tonalists, right? The tonalists that are among us that we take workshops and classes with, they'll use their colors, all their complementary colors, to get all sort of colors in terms of their grays and their tonal kind of quality that they get. That's what they're doing. They're using, maybe they're only using a handful of colors to get it, but that's what they're doing. I just happen to prefer a lot of color in mine, so I'll work with more color than a lot of tonalists do. If they're tonalists, I'd say I'm a colorist. And but of course, all of this could be toned down. So this is really, let me just zoom in and show you all the different colors that I have going here. And this is a really fun thing to do. If you tilt your paper and you drop your color, you know how it sort of will drip down a little bit. If you add the color, it'll start just sort of cascading down and let it fall back up. And all these beautiful colors just start melting together. And they'll give you beautiful, I'm just getting a beautiful feeling of color going on throughout here. And of course, we're going to build the stones darker. So that's going to happen next. But I really love that idea. This is, probably because we're painting plein air, we're not going to have the time to do it. But if I wasn't thinking that way, I would say not a bad thing if you wanted to add a little salt and get some texture, right? I know I didn't tell you to have your salt ready, but I just happened to see it there and I'm like, maybe a little bit of salt. But don't worry about it if you don't have it, because we're going to build some of that texture up. really wet, really drippy, that freedom of it just being loose. And you know, watercolors just don't stop until they're dry, right? They just keep moving until they're dry. You're outside, they're going to dry way faster. But we sort of have the luxury of our air conditioning right now, at least I do. And now I just want that to like stop on its own. I think I have enough color. It's a very light kind of feel. And I want to use a couple of different textures here. If you don't have salt, don't even worry about it. I like leaving that lower right corner for my signature. So I've learned to sort of allow that to happen. I always forget to do that. And now, you know, as you're working on that, I want to start going into this cluster of, this is all drying. So this is all drying. My building is still a little wet. The rows of grapes or olives, whatever they are starting to dry. Here's a great place that we can, again, bridge the palette. The flowers that are in here, I want to just show you. I'll go a little closer and show you how I want to approach this. So I know that they're more like a reddish pink color, but I'm going to use my dragon's blood and my violet to get some of these colors in the flowers here, because that will help bridge the palette. And who's to say what color flowers were there? Now, I'm just going to point out to you, don't have them equally the distance and equal shapes, sizes, or anything. You want these to be more haphazard looking than that. That's really important. And for some reason, we always like to have that idea of, I don't know, some kind of symmetry or whatever. So I'm just going to leave those there. And now I'm going to go in and yet again build some of my leaves. And I have my rigger. Okay, I'm way back on my rigger. I'm just really, let me just show this to you. I'm way back here. I'm not up here. Okay, I'm way back here. I just splattered my whole paper. Oh, well. And that happens. And I'm way back, and I'm going to take these brush marks and I'm letting them dance. I'm just letting the colors dance. I'm going to add some blue in here. I'm not saving those flowers. I'm letting those sort of melt into the green, blue, yellow that I'm creating here. And here again, one of the things that I think is very easy to have happen is as you take this line and these shapes for a dance, there's a tendency to have all of the marks sort of be evenly spaced, and you don't want that. So you really want to have that be, just take notice. And you know what, don't even worry about it, because it's something we could fill at any time. We could totally fill up those spots if you end up having that. So while we've used many colors here, what we're trying to do is have it be something that all the colors are being utilized effectively in different parts of the painting. That's what I'm going for. So I'll tell you a cute story while we're painting these areas here, and that was so we were in, I don't know what town it was, in Tuscany, Rada or something. And of course, what's going to happen, guys, is people are going to stop and they're going to look at your work. And, you know, it's just, of course, you know, it's nothing that really bothers me at all. But, you know, some people get a little intimidated by that. And so, you know, as they were watching, the people that were with me were like, well, don't look at me. Look at my teacher's work. Go over there. Go to get them away from them. It was kind of funny. And so, you know, so the couple came over and was watching me paint, and he handed me his business card and he said, "Let me see it when you're done. I want to buy it from you." And sure enough, he ended up buying it from me weeks later when I got back to the States. So it was just kind of a fun memory and a fun story. So I just sort of started working this area here. And, you know, I know I've said this before, but I don't ever consider any one area completed until I look at the painting as a whole. And that's really important. So I don't move away from an area and say, okay, that area is done, let me go to the next one. That doesn't seem to make any sense to me, because every mark that I make is going to affect every other thing that I do, right? It's just, it has to. It just has to. Now, if people don't know that that's like, you know, this trellis with these leaves and flowers, trickling down, then I'm really sorry. I don't know what to say. But I think it does say it's enough of an information there. It looks like there's a wall here, which is great. So we'll build that wall. Actually, there's a break, and then there's a little bit more wall here. This whole area goes super dark. So we're going to just throw that all in shadow. And we're going to use, guess what, all of our colors to achieve that. We're going to build a really great saucy dark to do that. And so I'm just building some more of these planters. And the more amount of contrast that you could get on here now, like in these areas, it'll help you later on for sure. And I'm just looking actually, and I'm seeing a little bit too much of a pattern. So I want to go in and, you know, sort of adjust some of that now by dropping some darks in. So that's my violet, and then a little bit of blue. The blue cerulean is really a good way to carry the color through on this painting. Not just a blue sky, but think of putting blue in your landscape, in your shadows, in everything. I have it all down here. It's just a great way to not just keep your colors in one spot. And of course, this is all in shadow here. There's a sort of a wall there that's in shadow. And if you see it drying too light, go ahead and just drop some extra color in. Now, I want to point out to you something. I'm seeing this area down here starting to dry. So I'm going to take my dot sprayer. You could try this if you have it. A dot sprayer is one that just sort of, you pump it in your water bowl. Let me bring my water bowl in a little bit in case you haven't seen this. So here's my water bowl, and you pump it till it starts building up a little bit of resistance. And then if you just tap it, it kind of spurts out, and it's going to give me a little bit of a pattern and texture there. Chances are, if we're on location, we're not going to be able to do that, but we are only simulating our plein air experience. And it might be something that you do back at the villa when we're working on our paintings after our beautiful Tuscan dinner. And we go back and work on the more details of our paintings. At least that's been my experience, and it's a wonderful experience. And again, if we stopped right now, and that's an important thing, if we stop right now, wouldn't we know what this is? I'm just going to add some water to this area here, this triangle right there. And what I want to do, guys, is I want to add right in here, okay, this area right here, the triangle that goes so dark, I want to use every color, same as I did here, but I want to add every color to build that really, really dark, okay? So that's what I'm going to do right in here. So now I'm going to be using way more color and a lot less water. I wet it, but I'm going to have a lot of contrast right there. And so if I add violet, I'm going to add some yellow. If I add my orange dragon's blood, I'm going to add some blue. That is the thinking always when I try to build these darks. And make sure you have more paint on your brush than water. And there's a beautiful ledge right here that is just, we're going to come right up to that edge right there. And you could see it's already, you could see all the colors, and yet you could see it all building a nice deep dark color. It's just such a beautiful way to build a dark. Tilt your paper a little bit, let it sort of move around, let the colors intermingle. You can see I'm just starting to build that dark. Now, because there's so much water, it is going to, dry pretty light. So I'm going to keep my eye on it, and I'm just going to keep adding color till I get the darkness that I'm looking for, right? And it may take a little while to get there. You may have to keep your eye on it, and you may have to keep adding more color as you start seeing it dry, and it's drying lighter. I could already see it's starting to dry lighter, but that's okay, because what are we going to do? We're going to keep charging it up with more color. So right now, I would say, even though this is a different color, the green here and this area here that went into shadow is a little bit the same, I know I want to go dark with that. Now, there's a couple of ways we could do that. We could take our neutral tint and we could go darker with it, but it's a little too soon to do that, I think, because I really think we could do it just with our complementary colors. And so I don't know if you guys have heard this about complementary colors. The way to look at them is this. If you forget, the way I remember is, I remember with yellow and violet is Easter, green and red is Christmas, and orange and blue tend to be, sports teams, okay? But somebody else had told me an interesting way to remember it, and it was a very cool way. And so I'll tell it to you. Maybe you'll remember it this way, because it tends to be something people forget. And that is that if you are, I'll just bring my palette in for a second. If you want the complement to yellow, think of the other two complements, red and blue, right? Red and blue make violet, but if you don't remember violet, remember the other two colors will make the complement to yellow. So if you want the complement to red, the other two primaries are yellow and blue, which make green, right? Red and green. And then the same holds true with your other primary, your blue. The complement is the other two primaries, red and yellow, which make orange. So maybe that just, to some people that might make a little bit more sense. To me, I just kind of remember the holidays, and that works for me pretty well. And if you use those colors enough that way, you will definitely, you will remember it. And I always think of using colors that way. So this just bled a little bit in here. I just took my tissue and I just gave myself that edge a little bit more than it was. That's all I did there. And it's already starting to tone down. I probably wanted to go way darker, but that's okay. We'll get there. We'll get there, we'll get there, we'll get there. And depending on where you are, I'm just going to pull up some more of these little shadows that are along the landscape here of the those beautiful Tuscan hillsides. If you're still here, fine. If you're still there, fine. Be where you are. Don't worry about it. Be where you are. Because at this point, I want to move around the painting, and I'm basing where I'm moving to based on what is dry and where I need to go next. That's all I'm doing. And so that's okay if that's where you are too. And again, this particular shadow color, I'm doing this with just a little bit of my dragon's blood and my violet. So not quite complements. Dragon's blood is more of a orange. So I'd say the complement would be more of a blue. So it's not really a complement, but they are working beautifully together to sort of create that hillside Tuscan landscape. And if we feel we need more detail there, that's just something that we just will have to go back in later and do. I'm just testing my paper to see where it's at and how dry it is and where I'm sort of at with things. And of course, it's going to dry faster if you're painting outside. It's just the nature of the beast. And if things melt together, I'm really not going to worry about things like that because I could always pull it out more later on, right? We just don't have to worry about things like that. It just doesn't matter. I'm looking for what I would call, more of a, let me go into my palette and I'll show you. This is just my dirty, messy palette. And I like working with what I call palette mud sometimes. Sometimes I get a little bluer, a little redder, a little whatever, greener. It doesn't really matter because I'm just getting a neutral kind of color. And I don't know if everybody's palettes look as dirty as mine. But I got great colors in here and I don't wash them away because I could use them for things like, this roof line, let's say. And we could just build some of these wonderful marks. It doesn't have to be any particular color. It just has to be something. The littlest dot says window. Again, I'm using my rigger. And, get this, guys. I mean, this is not a house portrait, okay? It's not a house portrait, so we don't have to describe it with enormous accuracy and detail. We just have to suggest it's melted right here into the mountains, into the landscape, into the area here, right? So, just know that we could make all those beautiful suggestions. And this is a little bit of, reverse definition, okay, is just seeing that we could push behind it a little bit more to get it to pop out. Do you see how quickly that popped out because I did that? And that's a little bit of violet there. Now, guys, I'm just going to move around the painting and I'll describe to you where I'm at so that you'll see that now I want a little bit more distinctive shrubs in front of the home here, right? I just want a little bit more detail there. And I want these marks to sort of melt in spots along the edge, just ever so slightly. Just that edge really does say a lot. And when you look at it like you're looking at my painting sort of from a distance, you'll see that that is all that it really needs. To say tucked in that hillside there. There's some nice little shrubs here. Again, I like using my rigger for work like this because it just takes my hand and I'm able to dance with it further. And I don't have to say shrubs everywhere. I don't have to, it's green and people are going to know, and let me just say that so much of this is really your own style and your own preference as to how far you go with this. That's going to be how you sort of build your own style and your own look, is really because you're deciding how much more or how much less you are choosing to do than either I'm showing you here or whether you do different colors or whatever. But you could see that we're able to get quite a lot of information in a very loose way. Okay. And really, I'm sort of taking my time because I want this to dry. This triangle here dried lighter than I want. So, and this is almost dry. This is still pretty wet, which tells me that, I guess I could go in there and I could drop in more of my colors, right? And there it is. That's my second or third time I'm sort of going in here and adding that darker tone. Let me go closer for you. And that's that edge of the top of the wall that the sun is catching. That's a really great spot. So, originally you might think that up here was your center of interest, but I think it's going to be right in here where this most amount of contrast is. So I think it's going to be, and I could see how I want to build the stones on the wall a little bit more. So you can see this is still wet, and so I'm able to drop in my colors again. So if you have neutral tint, if you have indigo, I'm going to drop some of the indigo. I'm not really using neutral tint, but if you have it, it's not a bad choice. Again, I'm going to switch to my rigger because I just really like using my rigger to sort of dance into some of these little reverse definition shadowy shapes. And that's building a lot of contrast right there. And this is a stone wall, so guess what? I'm going to make some marks that are sort of suggesting that. It's all really, really dark over here, but maybe the stones are that a little bit lighter than this inky dark right there. Just a thought. And that edge where that's coming down to the stone wall. And you're sort of getting an inkling how I want to build the stone wall. And it's interesting how light this all dried. I'm just inviting some of this dark to sort of come in here a little bit on the underside. So two places I want to go. One, I want to add some of the greenery here, just a little bit because it looks incomplete. And then I want to get into our stone wall. That's going to be the next area that we're going to go. So let's add a little bit of something to this left side, and let's do some stonework because I think that's just, you just can't see where you're going with this until you start building more of those things. And if you haven't started building it, that's where I would say we need to go. So let's do that now. And okay, so I just want to get a little bit of more color. So I'm going to be using some of my my green here. This is my undersea green. And what I'm looking to do is just define that edge a little bit greater for us and sort of start taking a closer look at what these shrubs are sort of what's going on here, and creating some of those shapes so that it says this is close up, this is a little bit more defined, and whatnot. And so I'm just for the sake of, this area here, just building some of that dark up in a really nice way. And already it's starting to make better sense, right? And we could do it in a way that doesn't necessarily have to describe every, leaf, because we're not going to do that. But certainly because it's a little darker, I added a little bit of violet here, guys. And maybe what you do is you look for, let me go a little closer, and this edge is really a good edge to just have that right up against there, that nice dark color, right up against there. And what you would look for is a way in which this shrub now takes on some nice details. Very dark and very so you're getting the sense that it's much closer, and yet it's there. And the darkest part really needs to be against this wall. And notice how nice and straight that wall is. Not. I've exaggerated it even beyond what is there. And that's fun, to exaggerate that kind of stuff a little bit more than what you see, or a lot more than what you see. Right? And when you want to get it dark, make sure you have more paint on your brush than water. There's plenty of water here, and if I drop some more color in, it's just going to, I just don't need all of that really water at this point. And to sort of affect that edge a little bit, I'm going to take my dot sprayer and I'm just going to, that edge, just kind of let it, what it does is it gives it some water and moves in a very interesting way that I did not plan. And it's a great interrupter. That's just the way I look at it. It just interrupts my marks in a really cool way. And there's just a little bit, not a lot of information on these planters, right? Just not a lot of information at all. Mostly I want to get into building some of the rocks. Some of that stonework is just so perfect. I want to show you how I want to do that. So I want to define a little bit more of the top of that rock area. This again is something stupid called palette mud, but it really is just all my colors. And that's all it is. It's just all my colors kind of all mingling together. And that's why I will never get rid of my palette mud. I just don't clean my palette because I find it so useful all the time. You know, people who start with these very clean palettes, it just, I don't know, it comes in too handy for me to clean it. Every time I clean, I'm like, oh, damn, I don't have palette mud. Now you notice that I'm adding that little rim of where the top of the brick is sort of from the side, and it's not continuous. I'm using like little breaks. And I'm letting the eye sort of connect the dots. Does that make sense? Like letting your viewer's eyes just take over and do some work. Make them work a little harder for you, and you don't have to give them all the information. That's just something that I just feel very confident in doing is, letting the eye do the work, their eye. So a couple of ways I want to show you to maybe build these rocks. And again, I just think that like palette mud that has all of my colors in it is just such a great way. I could go through it. I could find some blues and some reds and some greens. And there's just all kinds of great color there. If you don't have this, by the way, just take some colors and just drop them in to your palette. And next time you clean your palette, think twice. Okay, I'm going to start at the top. I'm going to start in the middle here because there's some beautiful rocks right here. And I'm just going to move this back out of the way. And I'm going to take a mark and then notice I put the color down. Let me go closer for you. I put some color down and I'm creating sort of a stone shape. And I'm creating that feeling of these rocks. They're really not, there's nothing even about them at all. Some of them melt, so I would just take it and just with a clean brush, just melt some of the marks up. That's really a beautiful way to build a mark and let marks sort of take over and be there, but suggestive. And here again, just make sure there's no pattern here, because there really isn't. And so I'm using my number 10. And I am looking at my source, and I'm finding great dark shapes to add. That's what I'm doing right now. And notice they're all different colors. So if some go a little bit more reddish, some go a little bit more violet, some go a little bit more bluish. There's lots of colors in here. So again, this is a great place to think about bridging your palette and having colors be everywhere that, in a beautifully suggestive way. And what this is sort of a glazing technique, guys. So it's just giving us some really nice opportunities. Let me back out and show you how quickly the rocks start happening and feeling more complete and more like there's something there. And of course, I can't do the rest of the painting until I start seeing some more of this happening. And when you start seeing this little bit of reverse definition going on. Some of the shapes are much smaller. Some are a little bit more, they're very, very irregular. Some are a little bit more orange. Utilize all of that to help you build this. Some are darker. And that's what just makes this area so fascinating and so great and so wonderful. Is, boy, you don't even know how old this stone wall is. Now, I want to point something out also that I want you to be aware of. I started in this middle area for a reason, and I want to point it out to you right now. And that is that something we talked about earlier, and that is that feeling of perspective. So we talked about it a little bit here, right, with these rows being more vertical and these being more on an angle. But when I start coming around to the that right side of the wall, notice that right here, okay, the stones start getting much more narrow because they are going all over the area of where it's wrapped around. So these stones are going to be more vertical and not as square, because they're not facing us. So as this wraps around, we really need to have that be something that helps build the painting and the perspective of it. So just, it's an observation, and it's a great way to help your eye start wrapping around because if you make them all straight, it's not going to work, right? It's just not going to make any sense at all, because that building is that, that formation, that edge is definitely going backwards. So it's really, really important that you do that. So these become much more narrow as you're doing this. So if you don't have palette mud, mix some up in your mixing palette. That's okay. And like I said, the next time that you think of clearing out um, you think of clearing out your palette, think twice. So that's what you want to think about, is these shapes are getting much smaller. Now, if you wanted to switch to, I was going to show this to you, to a vertical, a very narrow angled brush, that also might help you with some of these shapes because it carves them out. Go a little closer for you and show you how these can, using an edge of a brush, a flat brush that is angled, also is really helpful for architecture. And as it gets further around, you might even need to switch to a smaller one. All right, so as you get over here, they're like really just little slits of hints of something going on, right? There's just little tiny, not much at all. But that's all you need, is that to suggest it. And of course, this is just something that, you might just want to take the photo and finish it back at the villa. Done that many times. Because all you need is the impression of something happening for it to happen. Unless we're doing highly, highly realistic paintings, then we're really, it doesn't really require that. So just a little bit more in here. And something that I, sort of suggest, but I think it's a really good thing, and I always see some of you guys doing it, and maybe not enough of us, is standing back from your work and taking a little bit of a break from it being so close to you, right? And giving it a chance to be vertical and stand away a little bit from it, because that helps you. When we're looking so close, it's very hard to recognize, are we doing enough? And so that's when we think we have to do more, right? We think, I need more, because we're so close to it. But when we stand back from it, or stand up, or just take a little bit of a break from it and put it vertical and look at it that way, that's when we are getting a chance to see it for the first time as it's going to be viewed by our viewer, right? That's what's going to happen, is they're going to see it vertical, and they're going to see it in a frame, in a mat. So what did I just do here? I'll tell you what I just did. I'm thinking, if the sun is coming from this direction, there might be a little bit of a shadow that appears, on the lower right side of some of these pieces of stone. And it starts giving it a little bit of a 3D look. And I'm starting to feel like, my eye is being drawn through the painting. So maybe I want to have this come down a little bit here. I want to make sure that my eye sort of is being pulled into all parts of the painting. So that's going to be the next thing we're going to look at. But right now, we're just going to work on some more stonework here. And that little bit, and I'm just going to feather it a little bit into a little melting when I melt a mark, let me show you about melting a mark, guys, because I think it's a really important thing to do if you don't do it already. So if I want to take this side here and just add a little bit of edging to it, right? So I'm just adding that little bit of edge, but I want to take that mark with just a little bit of water on my brush, no color, and just melt it to the page. It just makes it look like it's now part of the page and it's not something separate. It's anchoring that mark to the page. So whether you're using a flat brush, a round brush, or anything like that, the flat brush is pretty cool, I have to say. Sort of carves it out for you. I just melted that whole piece right there, right to the page. And when I melt it, I'm taking the paint off my brush, and this is a drying mat that I have here. I'm just tapping my brush to the drying mat, so there's just a little bit of dampness on it, and I'm just moving it into some of those darker areas. Now I'm going to be really hard pressed not to do some nice splattering to that page, that bottom part there. So I'm going to cover the top part with my tissue, and I'm going to take my brush and I'm just going to give it some nice splatters. And I'm just mixing up some kind of crazy color. Yeah, just adds a little something to it. And of course, you could do this with all different colors. There's a little violet there, maybe a little bit of your gold, and a little bit of my dragon's blood. And let's just take a look. Yeah, it's kind of feeling good. Now, if you feel like you did too much, simple, don't worry about it. Take your regular spray bottle, right? And you could just hit it with a little spray bottle and let it mist out and start forming some beautiful marks for you. I never really worry about watercolors this way when I do this, because I always end up with something that I really like, and it really feels kind of fun to me, you know? So I'm feeling like I want to do that more in the area up here around this, on the flower boxes, right? So here's a great way to do this, is just take some tissue and just block off the areas that you don't want to have anything happen to, right? And now this might be a little smaller because it's flowers. So we could take our toothbrush, wherever my toothbrush may be here, and let me go in and get a nice color to splatter. And this is also a great, I'm going to move this up a little bit because this is also a great way to make it seem like the flowers are going beyond what you painted. So let me show you what I mean by that. So what happened here was I splattered this here, right? And it now looks like there's flowers there instead of the ones that I painted. Now I have another kind of, pattern going on there that I didn't do. A little bit of my green. And it just sort of loosens it up a little bit. let me back out and show you, it feels a little freer now, right? It doesn't feel quite as tight and quite as, as organized and as perfect as it was. And let me show you another trick here. If you make a splatter and you're not happy with any of the marks, let me just say, take your brush and just melt the marks away. So that's why I'm never really worried about like adding splatter or anything, because if I don't like it, it stays wet for pretty long and I'm able to just melt the mark away. But generally speaking, I'm really happy when I do my splatters. So now that I'm pretty happy, I really like the way this down here looks. I feel like, and this is why, again, I can't say, oh, I'm done with the back area and let me move forward. I feel like I need to do a little bit more in the back. You may not have that feeling, but that's what I'm seeing on my painting. And so all I could share with you is what I feel I need to do to finish my painting. And so I'm just going to go in and grab a little bit of my violet, and I just wanted to add a little bit more of the house and put it a little bit, I'll go closer, a little bit more into shadow. And I'm much happier with that. I could see it already, that I'm already happier with that. It just didn't need all. Do you see how darkening that made that look so much more like it belongs in the landscape than separate from it? And even though, guys, I see that in the photo, I'm only using the photo as a reference, not as the Bible. It's not my Bible. And now one more thing that I see that I want to think about is a way to get myself from up here to down here. So guess what? I could, just because it's not in the photo doesn't mean that I can't get your eye maybe to come into this way here and down here. Just adding a little bit more dark. Is it in the photo? No, I don't see it in the photo. Do I care? I absolutely am more committed to doing a painting than the perfection of the being too true to the photograph. So what's more important to me is being true to the painting. And unless you're doing a portrait that you must follow exactly, some kind of a, house portrait or something to that effect, take enormous freedoms when you do things like this, because it makes it painterly and it makes it more you into it. If you need some more of your cypress trees, go ahead and drop them in. I'm using, again, my rigger and just letting some of these kind of happen. A little bit of violet helps darken that a little bit. And this is how you take a photo and you make it your own. You make it your own. So really fabulous way to paint is making it your own, whatever that is for each of you. And I really love the splatter that I did. I'm really happy with that. I'm happy with this nice dark area. I like the way that now let me show you something. Let me show you something. This is really cool. Let's say you wanted to get some cutouts of maybe a hint of your rocks here. Again, I have my flat edged, this is a 1/2 inch edged. I have no color on it, but I am going to just have a little bit of water on it, ever so slightly, and I can push aside, and you do see how quickly some rocks are forming. This is a correction technique, and now we're using it as a way in which to build some texture and suggest this area just with a flat brush and a little bit of water on my brush. And look at what happened. I was able to find some more rocks here for us. And I always have a few different sizes. These there's regular flat-edged ones, but I like the ones that are angled a little bit better. And maybe a different size. This is my quarter inch. And that sort of takes that texture and adds a little bit more of it, which is pretty cool. And now I just want to dance around the painting and look for anything that I think might help it. So I'm taking a little bit of my Juan Brilliant #1, and I'm just adding some little, maybe highlights of little planty things that might be here against the darkness of the brick there. I don't know why, I just kind of felt like it needed it. So I'm showing you things that I feel mine need, and yours may not, but you may find that like you want to try some of these techniques. I love this trickle down thing. I just love when planters start trickling down their edges, right? The spills that happen in planting. Who's to say they couldn't go further than we see in the photo? Okay, here we go. I'm going to go a little bit, I'm going to drop these down a little bit more. Again, it's exaggerating, yes. Who cares? I don't really think that that's terrible, is that we exaggerate the things that we enjoy a little bit more. Just really scribbling in here a little bit. I'll show you the technique that I'm doing. It's just a little, again, my rigger has just become one of those brushes that I just love to use. Because I could sit so far back on the brush and I could just have a ball with the marks that it makes. You could see I'm just adding some darks into this area here of the planter to give it a little bit more movement and a little bit more depth. It's just the things that I'm seeing that my painting needs that I feel would help it to be finished. So you may find something similar. It'll give you an opportunity to sort of look and see if you feel your painting needs that also. And voila, kids, I feel like I did what I wanted to do for this painting. Oh, there's something I see that I don't like. There's some kind of like a swoopy thing going on here that I'm not really happy with the way. I'll show you what I mean. There's something going on here. See that mark there? I'm not really happy with the way this will happen. So if you want to correct something in watercolor, color and water will help you to do that. So if you didn't feather a mark or you made a mark that you're not happy with, just use a little bit of water and color to help correct it. And voila, it's gone. It's not there anymore. And there we are in Diavola Vineyards, where we sat and painted under the Tuscan sun. And I can't wait to go back, truthfully. There'll be plenty of time that we're going to be going back for sure, and plenty of trips for us to take. Okay, so I'm adding a little bit of secondary green to the rolling vineyards here, just a little bit, just to give it a little bit of further depth. Remember, what you're describing here is a little bit of the shadow that's on the side of the, from the darker shadow that we made. So there's just a little shadow area, a little further shadow. Oh, you could just keep going and going and going with a painting like this for sure. But take the time to step back from it and to see if it's where you want it to be. Just add a little bit more to it. I'm going to get my mat board, and that's a great way to tell me if I feel it needs more or if it's done. So here's just an old mat board that I cut into pieces. And it's also a great way to find your composition and to see if you need everything that's on your composition. Okay, let's go this way, Jan. That's their way, that way, and here. And maybe I need a little less sky, maybe a little less off that right side. You could see how quickly you could find a really great composition. And just because you painted to the edges of your your paper does not mean that that is something that you are stuck with. There may be a spot that you're not happy with that happened on your left side, your right side, whatever. Too much sky, maybe, whatever that is how you take your photo that you were there, or your painting from being there, and how you translate it into being a painting. And I think that this is just a great way to find exactly where you want to be. Sometimes when we paint to the edges, we're happy. And sometimes we just need a little bit of cropping to make us even happier. And that's kind of where I'm looking right now, is maybe just a little cropping inside. And that's where your matting comes in, right? Where you do your own matting, and or you cut a mat. You don't have to have it be exactly what is standard in any type of place that you get a mat. If you could learn how to get outside of the area of, an 8x10 or whatever, and learn how to cut your own mats. They're not that hard. So there we are in Tuscany. Oh my goodness. So I hope you had a good time visiting us in Tuscany today. One of the things that we were talking about when I was reviewing everybody's work was that when they look at it, when I'm putting their work on the screen and they're looking at it, they see it differently. And so I'm going to suggest that you guys take your painting and look at it vertically, set it up somewhere that you could see it, and then work on it in a different way. Notice what you want to do. Notice what you might want to add or change or whatever. Even putting it in a frame, something like this back here, just not even in a frame, but just on top of the frame will do you a world of good. You will see it completely differently. And thanks so much for visiting. And it's Jan Guarino, Fearless Watercolors, and I'll see you next time. Bye now.